years ago, Samantha Reynolds pledged to write one poem a day to try to be present. That seems to be a theme, actually, to be present today, and not miss the fleeting first year of her son's life. Her popular poetry blog, bentlily.com, was featured in O magazine and has sparked a movement of people around the world to slow down and savor their lives. She also runs Echo, an award-winning storytelling agency specializing in personal memoirs and company histories. Please join me in welcoming Samantha Reynolds to Leading Moms.
So I want to talk today actually about authenticity and how vital I believe it is to be authentic with ourselves and our communities and our kids. And we were invited as speakers, I think, all of us, to reflect on this theme of community. And as I thought about that, I realized that for me, the cornerstone of community is really emotional connection. It's not where we live, it's not what school we went to or what school our kids go to. It's who we're emotionally connecting with. But to emotionally connect, we have to be willing to be known, which means we have to be willing to be authentic, and we have to perhaps be willing to be a little bit vulnerable. So this is really quite hard for me. I sometimes think of myself as having authenticity deficit syndrome. So for example, this is really good for me to be up here because I genuinely want to be real with you, but I also really want you to like me. I want you to go away and say, like, Sam was so inspiring, and that dance is tricky of how to choose, how to be real and the courage to perhaps not care as much, whether I've made you laugh or I've inspired you, but just to choose to be real and just own that. So the irony of this is that I run a storytelling agency, and I counsel clients all the time because we do these personal biographies and we do these company histories, and I'm always telling clients that if you want your story to be remembered and you want your story to be inspiring or move people in any way, your story can't be, it was good, it got better, the end. Like, that's not an inspiring, authentic story. Your story has to have some topography. It has to have the anxieties and the fears and the moments that you soar. I'm aware of this irony that I'm counseling clients, and yet this is hard for me. So my personal, I would say, break with authenticity happened in grade 5. And because there's an audience of mostly women, I know many of you have probably had this experience. This is this odd social torture that is so ubiquitous that I often wonder if it has some evolutionary value, but I call it all your friends suddenly hate you. So this happened to me in grade 5, and I so remember the moment. It felt like this sort of black and white, all of a sudden, this sort of turning against me of my group of friends. And my response to it was so weird. It was like, I basically assessed this landscape, and I had this kind of oddly Machiavellian response where I thought, okay, like, this won't do. Like, I can't have all my friends hate me, so how do I make this better? So what I clearly have to do is I have to just pay attention to what they don't like about me and pay attention to what they do like about me, and I'll just change the things they don't like, and I'll just become the things that they like. And so I tried this, and it was sort of magic. Like, it worked. And I remember the leader of this group being like, oh my God, you used to be so annoying, but now you're super cool, and you can be back in our group. And I was like, this is a great trick. I will just do this for the rest of my life, and I will be happy. And I kind of did, up until recently. And I have been working really hard on this, building this atrophied authenticity muscle. But something alarming happened a couple of months ago. My son, Booker, he graduated from his little daycare, and they give the kids these little books when they graduate. And there's photos of their 2 years at the daycare, and they ask the kids questions, what's your favorite color? What's your favorite animal? What do you want to be when you grow up? And his answer Well, first I should tell you that the boys in his daycare, like almost universally, were obsessed with fire trucks. Booker, not at all. But what he answered when asked what he wanted to be when he grew up was a fire truck driver. And this actually really floored me, because I happen to know that when he grows up, he wants to be a nun. So the context is that we watch a lot of The Sound of Music. And he was like, obviously, like they sing and dance and hang out with, their friends, and they wear a cool costume. But the point is that at this tender age of 4, here's this child who somehow sensed that he would experience shame, I guess, if he answered authentically, and he would experience some kind of social acceptance if he answered that he wanted to be a fire truck driver. So the problem with not being authentic is loneliness. And psychologists and psychiatrists and counselors now universally agree that loneliness isn't a question of quantity of the people in our lives, it's a question of the quality of our relationships. Vancouver, unfortunately, is a bit of a hotbed of loneliness. So the Vancouver Foundation did a study a number of years ago, and Vancouverites named loneliness as their most pressing concern. So as moms, I think it's so important that we are authentic with each other. And Tara's a great friend of mine. And I often think of this beautiful moment where I shared this totally shameful parenting moment with her. So my son had just, he'd been at his soccer practice, and he'd had a total meltdown. And I had tried all the right things. So I had, been empathetic, and I had come alongside him and tried to name his emotions with him. And he was just getting more and more riled up, and I was getting humiliated, or I felt as though I was being humiliated and judged, and I lost it. And this is going to be really hard for me to share with you, but I'm going to do it in the spirit of authenticity and building my muscle. But I remember getting like almost sociopathically quiet with him, and this is so horrible. I like surrender that he'll need therapy for this, amongst other moments of mine for sure. But I remember personifying soccer. He was like, I hate soccer. And I was like, you're hurting soccer's feelings right now. And then I actually said, and if you keep saying you hate soccer, soccer's gonna hate you too. Like, who says that? But I remember bringing that moment to Tara, and her just like holding this space for me that was so non-judgmental, and I think like meeting me with another story of your own, and it was so beautiful. I also think it's really important that we're authentic with our kids. And I'm a big believer in actually bucking the axiom that we shouldn't bring our work home with us. I think we do a huge disservice to our kids when we leave our work behind. Those of us that are working moms, we live out our stories at work. We spend a huge amount of our time at work. We live out our values at work. And we experience a massive destorification in our society, where we've lost the ability to tell stories. Well, our work is this ripe, fertile ground for stories, and an amazing opportunity to bring our experiences, our work home, and share our authentic selves with our kids. Like, what better opportunity to talk about resilience and failure, and what it feels like to get up and try again, or successes. These are all ripe opportunities. So I understand not bringing the laptop home all the time in front of your kids, or maybe not always bringing the stress, permanently into the home if work's stressful, but talking about the stress at the dinner table, I think personally is really, really important. So all that said, parenting, at least for me, is often a really overwhelming experience, and I'm triggered all the time. Almost all the time. And so, one of the ways that I have personally tried to approach parenting in a way where I'm not just trying to survive these years, so I've got a 5-year-old and a 2-year-old, and I'm not just trying to endure them, but I actually am mindful of savoring them, is to write a poem a day. And I always feel odd when I'm introduced as a poet because I don't read much poetry at all. I've never studied poetry. My husband jokes that he's like, your poems are just long vertical stories. So they don't rhyme. I don't know like the ins and outs of the formalities of poetry. They're just my way of trying to savor the moments, and if I know at the beginning of a day that I've promised myself I'll write a poem, it just turns this noticing muscle on in me, so that I'm just aware of the day when the like absurd, chaotic moments, or the beautiful moments, the tender moments. I've got I guess that practiced noticing muscle, saying like, oh, that could be a good poem, and it's worked. It's really worked for me. However, I've stopped posting them online. So I did post one a day online on bentleylee.com for years, about 3 years. But then something happened. I had this amazing community of readers, and they were truly the most supportive, loving, non-judgmental readership and community. But sometimes they loved some poems more than others. And I started, and I'm sure, like, I know there's this row of bloggers here, and I'm sure some of you can relate that I became compulsive, for one thing, of like checking like Facebook and like how many poems are being reposted or comments. The disturbing part for me was that it influenced that noticing muscle. It made me start noticing only the things that my analytics showed me were successful, like we're getting reposted and shared, and that was never the point. So I've taken a number of breaks. I'm in sort of a long hiatus from posting online, but I still write them. Sometimes they're very short because they're only personal, like my standards have gone way down. But I still make a point of posting, or not posting rather, but writing something every day. And on that note, I will end by reading one. And it's actually about dads. It's about my husband. This would be an amazing experience, I think, for a lot of men, a lot of dads. And so I'll start with this one. It's called Captain Hook. I wrote this in January. Your dad came out to the car to help me with the groceries, dressed as Captain Hook. I shouldn't have been surprised, since the night before you smacked your forehead in bed like an old sitcom and said, "Mama, we totally forgot to do the poster for our play." Your dad is wearing your red housecoat, a tea towel around his neck, and a black velvet miniskirt as a wig. I suspect it's universal, submitting to these plots, deserting our poise with the other breakable things we put out of reach. Accountants, kings, taxi drivers, all of them, like your dad, eventually find themselves later in the day talking on the phone, a business call, an important tone of voice, forgetting that their socks are still pulled up high like a pirate over their pants. Thanks.